Intruder by Jarvis B. Chavez. My name is Patricia Blake. I was a rookie with the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. For my first assignment as a constable, I was posted to British Columbia in a large, sparsely populated area along the Yukon Territory border. It was a beautiful green, unspoiled wilderness, and in the winter, it was all white with snow for as far as the eye can see. My police detachment concentrated mostly on rural-based policing and a lot of search and rescue. That day, I was on my way to take several different reports in a very remote area. It was starting to snow heavily, and I had to drive many hours from our station just to get out here. The first report was over livestock mutilations. A rancher showed me mutilated animals all around the border of his ranch. Why would anyone do this, he kept asking me. I can understand stealing them and selling them, but why just rip them apart? I responded, there are many cult groups that perform rituals that require these types of animal sacrifices. The second report was a missing persons report. A young woman had never made it home from work over at the Gas and Dash one evening. They found her purse in a ditch just off the road. That was 5 days ago. Nobody has seen hide or hair of her since. The third and final report was a man and his wife who had reported a burglary of some jewelry and money from their home that occurred when they had gone out to get breakfast at a nearby truck stop. I interviewed both the man and his wife. I wrote it all up in my notebook and took pictures of the broken window that the suspect used to gain entry into the residence. The sun was setting when I got back into my police SUV and was back on the road. I'd been driving for about an hour when the bad weather had turned into a full snowstorm. There was poor visibility on the road, and the ice was making it difficult to drive, even with chains on my tires. I decided to pull over briefly and check in with the station. I radioed in, telling the dispatcher that I was overwhelmed by the storm and was going to try to seek shelter for the night. I would contact them in the morning to update them on my status and position. I pulled out my map to see how far the nearest town was. Just like I thought, eh? It would take 2 hours to get to the nearest town, even in good weather. I guess I was stuck spending the night in the SUV. I then remembered a farmhouse about 10 minutes from here that a banker from Toronto and his wife had purchased last fall. They had plans to convert it into a vacation cottage. I also remember a construction crew had started work on the property in late October. I hoped they would allow me to at least park on their property to weather out the storm. It was worth a shot. I managed to drive to the farmhouse, despite sliding off the road a couple of times because of the ice and strong winds. As I drove into the property, I noticed the place was abandoned. They had all left and probably would not back until the ground had thawed out in the spring. I saw the crew had left behind some construction equipment. I guess the construction crew started by remodeling the old farmhouse. I could spend the night there, I thought to myself. The crew had not yet torn down the dilapidated barn. I parked my SUV next to the house and went inside to see the condition. I entered through the kitchen. The construction crew had removed the door and replaced it with a plastic sheet. The owners had kept the main structure intact and were just adding on to it. I went upstairs. I walked through the upstairs rooms. They all had been left in various stages of completion. I found only 2 that had actual working doors. Out of the 2, only one had a working lock. I chose the one with the lock. I know, it was an empty house, but wanted to make sure I had a little protection from wild animals or anyone else who wandered in here to get away from the snow. I went back out and had a look around the place. Nothing but construction supplies scattered all around. When I walked into the barn, I saw a small, lightweight rowing boat that was probably left here by the new owners, along with other assorted boxes and personal items. The nearby lake was a great place to go boating in the summer. I then walked to my truck, grabbed my backpack and my RCMP emergency pack, and went upstairs to settle in for the night. I had luckily packed a lunch that I never got to eat because I got busy with work. I had a pack of cheesies, much better than Cheetos, don't tell the Americans. I also had my all-time favorite, a donair sandwich. To wash it down, I had my leftover Tim Hortons coffee from this morning. Quite the feast for a lass from Vancouver. I decided to turn in early, mainly because I couldn't get any cell phone reception with the storm and couldn't watch any YouTube videos. I pulled out my emergency blanket, one of those thin mylar things that look like wrapping paper. I luckily wore my heavy RCMP parka. I put my gloves on and used my backpack as a pillow. It was just before 3 a.m. when I heard a big crash that seemed to have come from the barn. I got up from the floor and walked over to the window. I peeked out, but saw no movement. I laid back down when I heard what sounded like a deep and menacing scream. It didn't sound like any moose or wolf I have ever heard, that's for sure. I put on my gun belt. I grabbed my flashlight from my emergency pack. I drew my sidearm and headed downstairs. I walked out the front door and headed towards the barn. As I walked into the barn, I was immediately hit by a foul odor. It was a horrible combination of mold and wet dog. Disgusting. Earlier, when I came into the barn, I didn't smell this stench. Something or someone has only recently been here. As I walked further into the barn, I saw a big hole in the back of the barn. It had to be at least 7 feet tall. It looked like something crashed through the barn wall. I walked towards the hole. I lost my footing and fell to the ground. Ouch! I sprained my ankle. My foot had fallen into a small ditch in the snow. I then slowly got up and looked down at the ground. That's when I noticed it was not a ditch, but a 5-toed footprint. My flashlight lit up a whole set of large and wide footprints. They led back towards the hole in the barn. I noticed the tracks seemed to have descended from a small hill in back behind the barn. The stride of the footprints was impressive. What could have made them? They are no bear tracks. I heard a big crash accompanied by the sound of breaking glass. It was coming from outside. I need to find out what the hell is going on here. I walked out of the barn and headed towards the front of the house. That's when I came upon my SUV. The whole front part of it had been crushed in. It was like something heavy fell on top of it. I looked around my SUV but didn't see a boulder or anything else that could have done this. Crap! How am I going to explain this to the sergeant tomorrow morning, eh? Then I heard loud noise emanating from inside the house. Looks like we have an intruder, I said to myself. Tabernacle. All right, let's see who it is. I quickly and quietly made my way into the house through the missing front door. I saw the door had been torn from its hinges and thrown out in the snow. When I had arrived, a brand new door had been there. It was also locked, that's why I had to go in through the back. I heard very heavy footsteps from the second floor. I walked up to the second floor holding my gun in front of me and ready for anything. It had suddenly gone quiet. Then I heard what sounded like a grunt behind me. I turned around and got hit in the face by what felt like a large, hairy tree trunk. The impact sent me flying into a wall. I bounced off hard and came crashing to the hard wooden floor. As I looked up, I saw a wide, hulking mass of fur and claws. It had these glowing red eyes. It just couldn't be. It was a Sasquatch. I raised my weapon and started blindly shooting at it. I turned and ran into one of the bedrooms in the back of the house. I quickly shut the door behind me. The door then exploded and pieces of wood fell everywhere. I fired my gun at it. It slapped at my hand and the gun flew from my grip. I grabbed at a bucket of paint I found on the floor and threw it at its face. It let out a scream. The thing tried to wipe the paint from its eyes. I saw a window. I ran towards it, covering my face with my arms. I crashed through it and fell into a thick patch of snow. I looked up and could hear the beast struggling with getting the paint out of its eyes. I lost my gun, and that thing doesn't look like I can take it down with a chokehold. I ran for the barn. There it is. I grabbed the rowboat and ran for the edge of the hill in front of the property. I then heard a loud crash as I saw this thing walk around from the back of the house. It started running towards me. I pushed the boat over the edge and jumped into the inside like I'd seen those luge guys do in the Olympics. I was going very fast down that icy hill. I briefly looked back, but didn't see that thing following me. I was thrashing about the inside of the boat. I was holding on for dear life. I bumped the side of my face several times on the boat. The boat hit a large bump and I was airborne. I came down hard and I heard a big crack. Next thing I know, the boat is falling apart around me. I start rolling on the snow without the boat and hit a snowbank. This stops me abruptly and my neck snaps back. H-E-double hockey sticks. My neck began to throb in pain. I slowly managed to get up off the ground. I did it. I had gotten away from that thing. I looked up and saw the road only a few feet away from me. I saw some headlights in the distance coming closer. It was a pickup truck being driven by a young woman. I ran into the road and waved down the car. Stop, stop! Oh my, what happened, officer? I need you to get me away from here now. It's official RCMP business. Oh, for sure, officer, no worries. As we began to drive away, I started to feel relief. That is when something rammed the pickup from our right side and pushed us off the road and into the canyon below. We rolled and rolled. All I could hear was the screams coming from the young woman and myself. Then, all I remember is waking up on the floor of the canyon. I opened my eyes and saw the red eyes of the creature looking down at me. His enormous clawed and hairy hand was coming towards me. I screamed out, "Help me! Help me! Someone please help me!"